Brutal justice. 8 bizarre punishments that made ancient Rome shudder. When we think about ancient Rome, magnificent structures like the Colosseum and Pantheon often come to mind, alongside images of powerful legionaries and philosophical thinkers in togas. But there was a darker side to this sophisticated civilization, a side where justice was dispensed through methods so bizarre and cruel that they would horrify modern sensibilities. Welcome to a journey through ancient Rome's most shocking punishments, where we'll explore how this advanced society maintained order through methods that reveal as much about their values as they do about their brutality. Before we begin, it's crucial to understand that Roman punishment wasn't uniformly applied to all citizens. The Romans had a highly stratified society, and your punishment depended largely on your social standing. The distinction between honestiores, the upper classes, and humiliores, the lower classes, determined not just how you lived, but how you might be punished, or even executed. Let's start with one of Rome's most infamous punishments, poena cullei, or punishment of the sack. Reserved primarily for those who committed patricide, the killing of one's father. This elaborate execution began with the convicted being sewn into a leather sack. But they weren't alone. They would be joined by a live dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a snake. This menagerie of animals wasn't random. Each symbolized aspects of the criminal's nature. The sack was then thrown into the Tiber River or the sea. The symbolism was profound. The criminal was deemed so reprehensible that they should die without touching the earth or the sky. The animals would panic in the sack, attacking the criminal and each other in a chaotic frenzy before drowning together. This punishment reflected how seriously Romans took the patriarchal family structure. To kill one's father was to strike at the very foundation of Roman society. Next, we encounter damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. This punishment became particularly associated with the persecution of Christians, but was used for various offenders from the lower classes. The condemned would be sent into the arena with wild animals like lions, bears, or bulls, often with minimal or no protection. What's particularly disturbing is how this form of execution evolved into public entertainment. At the Colosseum and other amphitheaters throughout the empire, crowds would gather to watch as humans were torn apart by hungry beasts. Sometimes, the condemned would be dressed as characters from mythology, creating theatrical death scenarios for the audience's amusement. Emperor Nero was known to have Christians covered in animal skins before releasing hunting dogs on them, creating a gruesome spectacle. For those who betrayed Rome, there was crucifixion, a method so painful that the word excruciating literally derives from it. Crucifixion wasn't a Roman invention, but they refined it into an art form of suffering. Reserved primarily for non-citizens, slaves, and enemies of the state, it involved nailing or binding the condemned to a wooden cross, where they would slowly die from a combination of exhaustion, dehydration, and asphyxiation, a process that could take days. The Roman approach to crucifixion was calculated. Crosses were often placed along busy roads as warnings to others. The height of the cross could be adjusted, higher for more notorious criminals to increase visibility, lower for those they wanted to subject to additional humiliation and animal attacks. Sometimes the condemned would have their legs broken to speed up death if officials wanted to conclude the spectacle more quickly. Less known but equally bizarre was the Roman punishment of live burial. The Vestal Virgins, priestesses who maintained Rome's sacred eternal flame, took a vow of chastity for their 30-year term of service. If a Vestal broke this vow, she faced a unique punishment, being buried alive with a small amount of food and water. Why not simply execute them publicly? Because Romans believed it was sacrilegious to spill the blood of someone with religious duties. Instead, the condemned Vestal would be placed in an underground chamber with a bed, lamp, and minimal provisions. The entrance would be sealed, and the Vestal would eventually die from starvation or suffocation. What makes this punishment particularly notable is that it was one of the few severe punishments that could be applied to women of high status. For certain crimes, Romans employed damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. While not physically painful, this punishment attacked something Romans valued deeply: legacy and remembrance. When someone was condemned to this fate, usually for treason or actions against the state, their existence was systematically erased from public record. Their name was chiseled off inscriptions, their statues destroyed or reworked, and their wills nullified. In a society that placed immense value on family name and remembrance, this was considered a fate worse than death. Emperors like Caligula and Nero were subjected to this treatment after their reigns ended. Archaeological evidence of damnatio memoriae can still be seen today in defaced inscriptions and reworked statues throughout former Roman territories. Another method that combined punishment with public humiliation was the forca, a wooden fork-shaped yoke placed around the neck of criminals, particularly slaves who had attempted to escape. The criminal would be forced to walk through public spaces announcing their crime, while onlookers were encouraged to mock and abuse them. The physical strain of carrying the heavy wooden structure combined with public shame made this an effective punishment for lesser crimes. For more severe offenses, there was the tunica molesta, the troublesome tunic. This punishment involved coating the condemned in flammable substances like pitch and sulfur before setting them alight to serve as human torches. Emperor Nero reportedly used Christians executed this way to illuminate his garden parties. The suffering was unimaginable, as victims would experience excruciating burns while remaining conscious until smoke inhalation or the burns themselves proved fatal. Our final bizarre punishment demonstrates the Roman talent for ironic justice. The penalty for parricide, killing one's parents, sometimes included forcing the condemned to first have their blood drawn and then forced to drink it, symbolically returning the lifeblood they had taken from their parent. This would be followed by execution, often by one of the methods we've already discussed. What do these elaborate symbolic punishments tell us about Roman society? They reveal a culture obsessed with order, hierarchy, and public demonstrations of power. Public punishment served multiple purposes: retribution for crimes committed, deterrence for others considering similar actions, and reinforcement of social boundaries. The theatrical nature of many punishments, from arena deaths to crucifixions along busy roads, shows how Romans used punishment as communication. These weren't just penalties. They were messages about power relationships and the consequences of disrupting the social order. The differential treatment between social classes reinforced the rigid stratification of Roman society. It's worth noting that as brutal as these punishments seem, Romans considered themselves to be more civilized than their neighbors. Earlier laws, like the 12 Tables, had actually been created to limit arbitrary punishment and establish clearer legal principles. The Romans were proud of their legal system, which they saw as more rational than those of barbarian peoples. As we reflect on these practices from our modern perspective, it's easy to condemn them as simply barbaric. But understanding the context helps us see how societies evolve in their concepts of justice and punishment. Many Roman punishments were designed to fit the crime symbolically, a principle still present in modern justice systems, albeit expressed in more humane ways. Today, we strive for rehabilitation over retribution, yet public shaming has found new expression in the digital age. Capital punishment remains controversial, but has gradually become less public and more humane in its application. In many ways, how a society punishes its wrongdoers reveals its deepest values and fears. The Romans' bizarre punishments speak to a society concerned with maintaining order in a vast, diverse empire, a culture that valued hierarchy, family structure, and public reputation above all. Their punishments were not just about dealing with criminals, but about spectacularly demonstrating the consequences of challenging the established order. As we close this dark chapter of Roman history, perhaps we should ask ourselves, what might future civilizations find disturbing or bizarre about our own methods of justice? How might our punishments reveal our society's values and fears to those who study us centuries from now? Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's most fascinating civilizations and its darkest practices. If you found this exploration valuable, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.